you better have a rules-based concept that allows you, whether that's zone, buck, belly, whatever. But I think it is important that you have something you can go to where you can get 3 or 4 yards. I'm not a big zone guy, just for a lot of reasons. We've run zone before, but I think this one's a little cleaner, a little simpler for our kids, and it has worked for us.
Football made simple. Become great at your craft by finding ways to make it simple for those around you. This is the Coaching 101 podcast hosted by Find a Way Productions with your co-host, Daniel Chamberlain and Kenny Simpson. Good morning, coaches. Daniel Chamberlain here. Coaching 101 podcast. That there is Kenny Simpson. I screwed up my intro going to all these travel events, Kenny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. It's okay. Change is good sometimes. Welcome back to the show. If you guys are watching live, we appreciate you. Remember, you can comment, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you're watching at. You can comment there, and we'll add them up into the podcast. We're talking a little gun tee belly today, Coach. Before we do, though, let's hear the quote of the week.
Yeah. So quote of the week. This one's actually kind of a short one. It comes from Team Themes, the next volume that's going to be coming out. And Marv Levy, I'm a Dolphin fan, so it hurts me to quote a Buffalo Bill great coach, but Marv Levy is one of the best ones. If you watch their, which is a really cool documentary, The Four Falls of Buffalo, when they went to 4 Super Bowls back to back to back, which I think a lot of people kind of make fun of, but I think that's extremely impressive that you were able to do that. His quote is, "When it's too hard for them, it's just right for us." And I thought, man, it's short, it's sweet, it's simple. We've started kind of using that a little bit with our kids this year. We're going to kind of see if it sticks. But if you can ever get your team to buy into that, like we want it to be hard, you're going to have something pretty special. And, Marv Levy, obviously, Hall of Fame coach, great coach, and what he was able to do to get those guys to buy into that obviously worked out.
It is a good quote. It kind of reminds me of that, we got them right where we want them when you're down 3-0 in the 7-game series or whatever, right? Yeah. But being an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, I kind of laugh. The Ja Morant quote from this past week. So the Thunder swept the Memphis Grizzlies, and of course, Ja Morant is a superstar on the Memphis Grizzlies, and he said, we really had them figured out there. We were making a comeback. Like, you just got swept 4-0, dude. Like, I don't.
He's trying.
Had them right where I wanted them, though. I was down 3-0, and I was losing the game big, and had them right where I wanted them. So, one of those chaotic quotes that'll go on forever, I'm sure. He'll never outrun that one.
I think the mindset, a lot of times, we want these ultimate competitors. I want them. I think you learn a lot about your team when you're way up, and you learn more about your team when you're way down. Like, that's what I'm really kind of watching as a coach, is when you probably aren't going to win the game, how hard are we going to play? Right. Or the game's already in hand, what kind of character do you have in those situations? I think that's a lot of times as coaches, those are situations where we kind of either give up or we already know we have it in the bags, we don't pay attention. To me, I pay attention almost more in those situations. Any kid's going to compete hard when the game's on the line. Which kids are going to handle it when it's not going well or going really well?
I hate to keep referencing the Thunder here, but it is basketball season or the playoffs. And, they were down 29-0 in game 3. Or not 29-0, but they were down 29 points and came back and won it by, 5 or 6. Kind of the same situation, right? Like, you're down 30, essentially, to another playoff team on their court. And, those guys did have to kind of keep playing. So it is the ultimate competitors. I agree, man. That's the way it has to be looked at, especially if things aren't going your way.
That's right. And that helps you, down the road and building what you're building. This year for us, we won 13 games. I believe we were losing in at least 4 or 5 of those games. And several of those were in the second half or the fourth quarter. And I think that speaks to the mental toughness of the kids.
For sure. Well, sweet, Coach. Before we get in here, man, why don't you share some ways that we can simplify football for our coaching and our players? What's up, coaches? I want to talk to you for just a few moments about your program. The longer I'm in this profession, the more I understand that efficiency is truly the name of the game. You're talking offense, defense, doesn't matter, right? Eventually, you're going to come down to checking out your efficiency. So I have to ask you, are you doing everything in your program the most efficient way, right? Are you fundraising the most efficient way? Are you representing your players and your program to the public in the best way? Are you planning to build the facilities the most efficient way? If you answered no to any of those, or really even if you answered yes to all of them, and you haven't contacted Mark Bridges at Ace Sports, you're missing a key step. So look, Mark and his team, they are the go-to group for video board and scoreboard installations for your school. They're not just football either. Mark can help you mock up your newest video board for your that new stadium, or maybe even your old stadium, right? That's where Mark and the guys come in. And we're not just buying a flashy thing, right? Yes, it's nice. It's pretty neat to have that big scoreboard, that big video board, but you're also, you're investing back into that program. You're investing into that newest fundraiser. Sure, you can keep selling your discount cards, your beef jerky, hosting pie auctions, whatever it is that you like to do. But let's just be honest with ourselves, guys. We're not making enough money for those big ticket items. For the big ticket items like turf, an indoor facility, that's where you need a big ticket item fundraiser. That's what Ace Sports is offering you today. Guys, I've talked to Mark several times now, right? And it always comes down to big school, small school. Right? Well, of course, the big schools can afford that new video board, but the small schools really can't. It's just not true anymore, man. Your school isn't too small, and I promise. Okay, 1A, 2A schools, it doesn't matter. Mark and the guys, they're helping them out. Contact Mark today at mark.bridges@acesports.com and let him come give you a quote. Let him show you and your administration the plan. Now, really, it's the cheat code, right? Let him show you the cheat code that is fundraising with Ace Sports video boards. Tell him Daniel sent you. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Speed and Movement. At athleticspeedmovement.com, we've taken Del Basquet's 45 years of speed and movement training and put it all in one place just for you. You can get the same training that NFL players have been getting for years, collegiate players have been getting for years, and now high schools across the nation are paying thousands of dollars to bring Del in to install his system, but we've got it online for you. It's time to help your team become faster, not just in the 40, not just their sprint speed, but between the tackles and their cuts while they're chasing down the quarterback. It's time for you to help them become faster everywhere. Jump over to athleticspeedmovement.com. There's an orange button there. Just click it. It says, get the keys to playing faster. You'll get the 3 core movement video from Dell. He's explaining the science behind it, all for just the price of your email. Check it out, athleticspeedmovement.com.
Coaching 101 podcast is sponsored by Findaway Productions. Findaway Productions also sponsors fbcoachsimpson.com for all your coaching needs, with over 30 coaching materials, books, as well as 50 PowerPoints and videos and smaller materials and the free magazine headsets. Findaway Productions also sponsors offensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things offense, and defensivecoordinatoracademy.com, all things defense.
All right, Coach, appreciate that. If you guys haven't, reach out to Ace Sports. I know you just saw a ton of live video last week, or this past weekend, as I was live in Kentucky with Ace Sports with Mark up there and RJ. If you're a Kentucky coach and you've started buying into the podcast here, RJ is going to be your guy. So reach out there as you need to get your scoreboard, video board, whatever it is you're needing Ace Sports to do for you. Where they can do all sports, right? You can do basketball arenas, soccer, football, whatever it is that you're doing. They have a plan for you, so hook them up. Coach, tell me about this Play Callers Guide. I know that it's been out just a little while now. It was like a #1 seller on Amazon, right?
Yeah, it was always cool. And it's always cool when you put stuff out because, man, I hope, because you have to order them in bulk, and then you sell them. And you're like, man, I hope we don't have a garage full of these. But it's really cool to see. I was a lot in the same world as coaching football like a basketball coach. That was one of the first books I put out, or One Play Many Ways. Kind of the idea. There's some philosophy in there, but if you've read my books, we're pretty practical with what we do.
Right.
Kind of rules on, hey, if you want to be a good play caller, here's things that might help you. Here's things that have helped me. I can only speak to my own experience. And if you listen to our bleachers, there's plenty of times I don't call the right play, but for the most part, you try to learn as you go. So we try to put those, practices into how to organize a practice, how to script, how to break down a defense, that kind of stuff. So it's been one of my favorite books to write. It's the Play Callers Guide. It's over at fbcoachsimpson.com. And then we just put out a defensive book. I've been getting hit really hard to put out another defensive book. My defensive coordinator, Garrett Denton, I think is one of the best in the entire country. I really believe that. And he's taken our 3-4 defense and made it extremely multiple. So that's the most recent book I kind of put out documenting, how are we we can get into any front, we can get into any coverage, we can adjust. We teach our kids automatics. How are we doing some of this stuff? And he's kind of taken what we were doing in the 3-4 to a whole new level. Excited to see even where we're going to go next year. I think we're going to play with some 3 safety stuff. And so excited to watch how he evolves, a traditional defense in the 3-4 and makes it very modern.
I love when coaches start going multiple front, and it's not because they're just adding stuff to add stuff, but because they found it. I love the way you do it, right? Look at the schedule. Who do we need to beat? What can give them fits? And so people that can take their base package and still run their base package, but now we can, tag it up and add all these little extra wrinkles, because that's that much more that a guy has to look at, right? For what does he get, 4 days to install for his kids to beat your now 3rd defense? Like, what? It's just, it gets pretty wild.
Well, we're about to talk about offense today, but we're about to talk about having a run play, and I think one of the ways you stop run plays is if you're really, really good at your technique, that's great. But if that's not going to work, you have to have multiple answers to give them multiple looks.
Yeah.
And so we're going to talk on the other side during the podcast, but I think the defensive answer to a lot of that is you're just trying to give them a different picture.
For sure. Sweet. Well, let's jump into it here, Coach. We're talking part 1 here. We're going to talk gun T-belly today. And I love that I brought it up because I'm interested in your play, your version of the play. And you said, well, we better not call it belly because we'll make somebody out there mad that's gatekeeping the name belly. So my words, not yours exact. But I guess first of all, I talk about what is your version of belly and how does it differ from, throwback wing T-belly or whoever else has got this play called.
Yeah, well, belly, the idea for us is when we went to the gun tee, a long time ago, that we wanted to have wing tee based runs. We wanted to have some wing tee based runs. So, we have buck sweep. A lot of people know we've talked about that on this podcast. We needed an inside run. Usually in the wing tee world, that's trap. That really didn't work for us just because of the shotgun. And I might not be a great teacher. I don't know why. It did not work. So we needed a run that would fit there. Well, the wing tee verbiage, is belly is kind of your inside dive play where they'll X block it and do some different things. And of course, we did some research on that. I said, well, I kind of want to go back to something we were running in the spread. We were running basically a lot of people call it like power insert. So most spread teams, are going to be big on power counter, especially those 20 personnel type teams.
Right.
But the problem with us was we were not really, big enough. Power, I think, requires, we call it vertical movement, like moving people up the field, getting hip to hip and double teaming and kind of creating movement. We were playing teams, back then where we didn't quite have the meat up front to move them that way.
For sure.
So we kind of evolved into this essentially kind of like almost a draw type deal where we were going to wrap our backside guard as an insert blocker, and we were going to run where you weren't. Essentially, we taught our offensive linemen that you have number 1 or 2 or whatever we're numbered off, and the end man on the line is going to base out. So usually on power, everybody's down and you kick out. Well, the only real difference for us is we're not going to kick out. We're going to base out with our tight end or tackle or whoever that end man is. And then if we have an extra guy who's attached, which for us, we usually have a wing attached, or maybe it's a guy in the backfield, instead of getting a kick, he's going to now lead, because there's no need to kick if you're basing out.
Right.
So if we do it right, we could have 2 guys that would insert. So kind of think of like a power movement or an ISO type play, but we're also wrapping a backside guard. So we're getting 2 guys to insert. And I can't emphasize this enough. Probably the biggest difference is we emphasize horizontal movement, basically creating a gap. We're not trying to push you upfield. We're just trying to create a seal in whatever gap you're not in. So if you don't, have a defensive lineman lined up in the B gap, we're going to run it B gap. If you don't have one lined up in the A gap, we're going to run an A gap. We're okay to run it whatever gap is opened up. And so for us, it kind of became essentially a moldable, movable play that depending on what front we might see, it could hit really any gap. And so we kind of teach our linemen, that's what we're looking for, and that's how we're going to try to create that.
I love that it's because it goes back to rules based, right? I kind of compare it to the way that I run duo, the way that I draw up duo or rule up duo, where it's like essentially if there's a guy in your gap, you're taking him. If there's not, you're helping backside. And I mean, I think that not exactly, but it does eventually that opens up a gap, right? There has to be a place where there's not a player, and that's where we're going to try to stick the ball. I mean, that's the simplest form of football is we're going to run where you aren't. So I absolutely love it. Does this usually, so I know you run some quick belly. Does that make it more complicated? Does it turn into like a GH counter?
No, we try to teach it the same way. So again, in man will base out. Every other lineman will take them basically where they are. So like if I've got a B gap defender, we're gonna run a gap. We're gonna base them out, run a gap, and then now our inserter, our extra blocker, becomes our running back a lot of times. So he would insert, and we would wrap the other guard. So we're going to try to get two if we can. The great part about it, I think, the great thing that makes it play well is really you could run it out of 10 personnel, 11 personnel, 21 personnel, 12 personnel, 31. It doesn't really matter what personnel you run it in.
Yeah.
Obviously, we run it from our base a lot, but we run it to the strong side and the quick side, basically to a two-man surface on the quick side and to a three-man surface on the strong side. And the rules don't change. And the kids are taught the same rules. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like a lot of guys say, I don't want to run this version. That's fine. You don't have to run what I run. But I think whatever you run, you better have rules. You better have a rules-based concept that allows you, whether that's zone, buck, belly, whatever. But I think it is important that you have something you can go to where you can get 3 or 4 yards. I'm not a big zone guy, just for a lot of reasons. We've run zone before, but I think this one's a little cleaner, a little simpler for our kids, and it has worked for us.
And I just love keeping things. If you're zone, be zone. Run inside zone, outside zone, teach duo as zone, whatever you want to do. But if you're going to be gap scheme, like if you're running power counter or buck and belly, whatever, like it doesn't make sense to try to insert one zone play and be like, well, we're going to run inside zone sometimes. It never has made sense. I get it, the way that your rules work, right? If you're going to run a pass pro that way or whatever with the count system, but I just really like everything just being gap scheme. Teach the kids one. I kind of pride myself on O-line's going to learn, 5 or 6 plays a year. That includes all the pass plays because we're going to pass pro it 1 or 2 ways. That's all I'm asking of them. So it is nice when you can rule something up very, very similar, and then you're not really changing plays, right? It's more of a tag from one thing to even, I guess, comparing it to buck, right? I'm just tagging it and saying, hey, you guys are switching roles. We're going to base out instead of run away from him because I'm not going to kick him. So it's pretty neat. Let's jump into the importance of having that inside run. You talked about, you're a buck sweep guy. Buck is kind of an off tackle play. You run a little of that pin pull stuff that gets it out on the edge, but you still needed an inside run play. Why is there such an importance on having kind of an A gap to B gap run play?
Well, I think as a defense, that's probably the first thing people are doing is breaking down where you're running, and then they're going to put, their guys there to stop them. We've played a lot of teams that really no one threatens the A gap anymore. You just don't see it in the gun. You don't see a lot of like A gap pressure unless people run a lot of power, and that would be probably, pushing A gap and hitting it there. So I think you need something there that's going to work, and I think you need something that's going to work even if you're overmatched. That's where we prefer gap scheme over zone scheme, because in my opinion, if you're going to run zone and you're just outmatched up front physically, that becomes a problem. Where this is very much, we're going to run to this gap. Now it's the gap that you give us, but it's very clear where we're moving. So it gives us the ability to kind of get those hard yards. And I think you got to have something in your playbook that's going to threaten a defense that might be A, better than you, and B, that's adjustable, that you can make quick tags on and make quick adjustments on. And I think that will work against any front. And we just talked about at the beginning of this episode, defenses need to be multiple. Well, as an offense, you better have an answer for when they become multiple. What is that going to look like? So I think it's really important you have that. Of course, that could be a lot of different runs. If you're under center wing T, that's probably trap, or old school belly. So you have those runs kind of built in. That could be power, counter, zone, whatever it's going to be. For us, again, we needed that play that, they're going to be maybe a little bigger than we are up front if we're going to go as far as I want to go, but we can still get yardage here. We like it for us because it can hit anywhere from A, B, or C gap. Like you don't call old school run plays like 32 blast or, 44 whatever. And if you don't even know what I'm talking about, that means you're young. But it used to be that's how every play was called. It was a numbered hole and a number of who's getting the ball. We didn't want to go that direction. One, because we want to be able to run any run play, including belly, with any player on our team.
Right.
And two, we didn't want to call a hole and then they stick a guy in the hole. Like calling 32 blast is great because you're going to run that ball, to the right side, right off the guard. Well, that doesn't look so good if they put two guys there. So we wanted a play that our kids would know by rules. Okay, if there's two guys here or a guy here, we're going to run it one gap wider. Instead of trying to bang your head against a wall, we wanted a play that would allow us kind of to run where you're not. And so that was big for us. Last thing is, depending on what you do, most teams, when they play us, they're going to load up stop buck sweep. That's just what they're going to do. We know that going into the game. If they don't, we're not going to stop running buck sweep. That's just kind of, everybody knows when you show up to play Southside, if you don't know how to stop buck sweep, it's going to be a long night for you. And if you do things to stop buck sweep, which a lot of times that can be formation, alignment, whatever that might be, you're going to leave yourself vulnerable inside. Because if you're going to load up C and D gaps, probably you're leaving open A and B gaps, or maybe even the backside where we could run what we would call quick belly. So we've got to have that counter. And I'm big on being really good at what your base thing is, which for us is buck. Then you don't have to be experts at belly. I think we run belly pretty well, but that's not really our bread and butter. But we're going to run this play when you give it to us. And that's kind of the idea we think of offensively is we're going to major in these one or two things. So for us, that's usually going to be buck and probably going to be some version of an RPO or a pass. We're going to kind of major in those two worlds. When you take that away by alignment, we've got to be good enough to attack where you give us. And a lot of times for us, that kind of defaults to belly, because if you're loading up to take away outside run, well, that would dictate as a play caller, run it inside. And right. Belly kind of becomes our catch-all in that world. If you don't run buck sweep, it could be you run outside zone, outside zone, outside zone, and what is your inside run that's a counter off of that? And that's what you got to kind of think of as a play caller is, we're going to be really good at jet sweep or outside run or pin and pull or whatever that's going to be. We need some kind of counter that's going to take advantage because teams aren't just going to line up and let you have that. They're going to start taking it away. So what are you going to do next?
Absolutely. Once again, man, I just think that's such the best. That's the greatest answer right now in this version of football where ball's coming back to the phone booth anyway. And like defensive coordinators aren't dumb. They're starting to load the box up again, right? We got through the spread world. I know you're talking about putting in a 3 safety thing, but I know you're not using that against every team, right? That's just the teams that refuse to get in the phone booth. They still want to spread it out and let their athletes run wild. But it's not what most of us are going to do, especially small school ball, right? It's still just what's going on between the tackles or between the tight ends or whatever personnel group you can get on the field and be successful. So having a play that hits anywhere, I think, is one of the most successful things you can do as a coach. Because you're right. Look, kind of run old school 24 power. Right? Some guys still teach that ball carrier and hole. And what do you do if it isn't there? Well, now you're telling a kid to move here, move there. You start trying to read a thing maybe. Or do you just run into the brick wall all night long? And at the end, you're like, well, they were just better than us. No, they weren't. Right? Maybe they were better. Like you got out coached by your inability to be flexible. And so I really appreciate, I don't like calling numbers anyway. I think numbers are just They like transpose too easy for me. I can't do word association with numbers, whatever it is. So I would much rather just have a word that says we're doing this. I like, you used to do weapons. The guys I'm with now do NFL teams. Like having words that mean a thing. We're going left or right and we're running this play. I still think even Joe teaches like 24 is power, but it's not ball carrier ball. It's just a scheme at that point, right? He's taught it where you can look inside or out. But that's just a kind of how he calls that play. So I really appreciate that a coach is out there trying to make people successful. Saying we can go anywhere you're not. Line it up. Because I mean, and so how does this play work? And it's kind of off script here, but how does it work if you just get like, I don't know, a true 5-2 or worse? What if they just load the box on you and you've got a defensive lineman in every gap? Is there tags to stay home? How does that work?
Yeah, we can do stay calls and we can do adjustments on there. And honestly, if they're going to have the way I kind of look at it is if you're going to line up a guy in A, B, and C gap, we ought to be able to run buck sweep till the cows come home. I mean, that ought to be the play call, which is what we want to run anyway. And so we're kind of looking at, okay, you're old school 5-2. Well, I mean, all right, assuming you're going to put a guy probably inside the tight end and outside the tight end. Like that's probably how I would do it, which leaves the B gap open. So we run belly. That's probably where belly's going to go is B gap, So that's kind of what we're looking for. The great part about this is you could run this out of 10 personnel. I mean, we run a lot of tight end trips away from the tight end. You don't have to have that other inserter because now formationally, we're going to make you go out and cover the trips or twins or whatever it is. And so now we only need one guy to wrap. We don't have to have two inserters.
Guy out of the box.
Because basically, if that guy stays in the box, we'll just throw it out there to the trips. And so the play's been good. We've run it with RPOs. You can pair it with a lot of things. And so that's why we think it's just like inside zone, or power. But the good part for us is like power, you kind of have to have 20 personnel. Like you kind of have to have at least another H-back to kick out.
For sure.
The way we're blocking this, you don't have to have that guy. So I could run it out of 10, out of 11, out of whatever personnel group. I could put quads away from the tight end and run with quarterback. And so you can present a lot of challenges because with us basing out the DN instead of kicking him out, now I don't have to bring an H-back in.
So, I mean, everything I'm hearing sounds like this is what I've been taught was one back power. And that's what I learned from Bill Blankenship up at Walsover. That's kind of what they were running. Right. They always ran power, but the guard was basically inserting a gap every time. And I was like, that's really tight. In fact, the running back generally end up cutting backside a gap more than anything, right? It's just wherever it opens up, you just let his vision take over. So it is a super good play. And it is nice if you want to go spread world and be in 10 personnel and you don't have a guy to kick. It is a great play. So I can appreciate that. But you kind of got into the dressing it up there. So let's just jump into that. How do you dress this play up? How do you keep, obviously, I mean, it's the name of the gun tee, right? Is we're going to run 2 or 3 plays, but we're going to throw stuff all over the place. We're going to dress things up, window dressing. So how are you doing that with this play to keep it successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing you think about, and I think what makes the RPOs pop, and you're seeing it now at every level, RPOs off inside and outside zone are good. They're not bad. They're hard to stop. It's a good thing to run. RPOs, when you pull a guard, become way more explosive because that puts that linebacker in a really big bind. Because most linebackers, they're either reading the triangle or they're reading the guard, and when he sees the guard pull, he's got a hard decision to make there. Most of the time, our linebackers would be taught the guard pulls, you got to go now. Like you got to go now, especially if we're calling belly or power or whatever you're seeing. It's going to hit quick, so you got to go meet him in the hole. Well, when he does that, he vacates a big area, and so you have opportunity there for an RPO game. Also, when you pull guards, think about how you coach your defensive line. A guard pulls, you're probably coaching that guy to squeeze, which could open up the pull. So you're starting to see, I do it off a buck too, but belly or power be the same idea. That has become more explosive in the RPO world because it's taken the defense's, scheme and made them wrong. You're coaching your kids all year long. If I'm a D lineman and the guy pulls, I got to get in his hip pocket. I got to go. And now we're going to pull it, or you're teaching a linebacker when that guard wraps, you got to go. You got to go meet it, because if you don't, he's going to be on you right now. And so that has made the RPO game. Of course, you can also do it like I mentioned before. You could just do it really easy, put trips out there, and if they put 2, you throw it. And if they put 3, you run it. I mean, so it could be an easy pre-snap screen or run, or it could be a post-snap RPO. But that's been a really easy way. We try to do it with every run we have. That doesn't even get into play action, which of course you can easily do play action off of this. If you're inserting, we insert our wing a lot. We run belly, so it makes a really nice little tight end runs vertical up the hash, wing runs inside up the. I'm sorry, tight end runs up the numbers, wing runs up the hash, and you can kind of play with that safety if he's going to come down and run fit. So you got play action, you got the RPO game. I've already kind of mentioned formationally. I think this can be run out of any personnel group, any formation, and then you start tagging that along with however you want to dress up and get into your RPOs, play actions, that kind of stuff. So for us, it's been a kind of a catch-all type play. We were running this before we were even running the gun tee. We just kind of brought it into it. So it became really, really good for us.
Yeah, it's really nice when you compare two worlds together, right? Like I think once you can merge and just find the good out of all these systems, you still have weaknesses, but you don't have to, kind of flaunt your weaknesses. You just put a play in that hits, which I think is fantastic. Obviously, I'm a guy that's into the dress it up world. I'm into the tags, the motions, the shifts, formation, like galore. It was really fun to stand in front of all those guys at the Gun Tee Clinic in Boston, and then again in Milwaukee, and talk about, hey, we might have shown 60 formations in one game last year, right? But our kids know 8 formations. Like, it's just, that's the world you want to live in. And now you're talking about a play that hits anywhere. So they're already probably going to line up a little unsound or show a weakness. And now you have a way to take advantage of that. Like, that's just like, I don't know. That's not the best playbook in America, honestly. Go where they aren't is a really good way to play football on offense.
Well, I mean, that's, again, I don't mean to get into pitching books and stuff, but to me, that's a lot of the world I got from coaching basketball. I know we don't think about that a whole lot because we're coaching football, and they're obviously different sports. One thing basketball coaches do, I think, better than football coaches, soccer would be in that world too, even hockey probably be in that world, is football is so structured. We go back to the huddle, we get the play, we run the play. So it's by nature, it's very structured. You go here, you go here, you go here. In the basketball world, hockey world, soccer world, you don't get timeouts. Like, you have to teach concepts that your players master, and then they have options off of those. So you're starting to see the football world start to embrace that. First, you saw it in the passing game where you'd have option routes where a guy's going to run, read the leverage, make a decision. So you saw that in the passing game. Then you started to see it a little bit with inside zone, but I think that's kind of where the game is moving. Yep. Is you can't do that if you've got 35 million plays or you're running 24 blast or you're running whatever. You can only do that if you're running few plays and your kids know the rules so well that they can make adjustments on the fly. And I think that's kind of where whatever you want to run, but belly for us kind of falls into that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, sweet, Coach. It's a little bit of a short episode today, but, I think we knocked all the stuff out pretty quick. Gun tee belly seems very simple. Some of you guys might call it one back power or power insert, whatever your terminology is for it. Don't get too caught up on words. That's something I've learned very quickly in my short amount of time in coaching, is like, we all just speak different languages. You're talking about how many languages are on earth. You have to probably double or triple that just to get with football coaches, right? We are all saying the same stuff in a weird way. But you've coined it the belly for the gun tee program, and I think it works just fine. Having that play that can go anywhere, regardless of what front. I think it's really useful, especially when a system like yours, where you often talk about, you get the flavor of the week defense, right? You're going to get the trash front that guy has drawn up on the board and be like, I think this makes us as gap sound as possible to stop all of this stuff, because you're doing a ton, right? As soon as you give up, like you said, buck sweeps trying to, off tackle, hit the edge. Take that away, we've got something that goes inside. Take them both away, we'll hit you with an RPO. It's just a constant arms race to, can you stop us? And I think plays like this that are kind of fluid, hit wherever the weak point is, they sure say no, you can't stop us awful quick. So it's good stuff. Why don't you get us into the lesson of the day, Coach, for what not to do as a coach?
Yeah, I think we've kind of been hitting on this, so I'll just kind of repeat here a little bit. But the lesson on what not to do as a coach, or what to do as a coach, is run less concepts, but run them really well. I think we've kind of hammered that home on this podcast. I know I've tried to hammer it home. It's a lesson I wish I had learned as a young coach, because the mistakes that we tend to make is when things don't work, we add more in. Right. It's almost like when you're mixing a punch for everybody to drink, and it doesn't taste good, so you dump more water in, which makes it taste worse, so you dump more water in. And so I think that a lot of times as coaches, that's what we do as a natural instinct. What can I do to help our kids? We better put more in.
Yeah.
Where the reality a lot of times is, let's get really good at what we do. And then once we've done that, we can maybe mix a little bit in there. And so I think that's kind of the lesson we've hammered home on this episode. I know we've hammered home on other episodes also.
Yeah, that's what this podcast is based on, right? It's just, you got to simplify things. You don't get better by making things more complex, right? If a system's broken, you got to strip it down to its bare parts, start over back at the basics, and grow it from there. So I think it's a great way to look at it. Just run less stuff and be better at it. One last time, we talk about Ace Sports here. If you didn't catch the live stuff last week, or you still don't know who Ace Sports is, reach out, man. Mark and Ryan and now RJ are just some of the names that I know that are helping with Ace Sports. Basically, they're going to sell you or sell your admin on a cheat code for fundraising. So that's where you guys want to be. Whatever your big ticket item is, that's the video boards is the way to go. Kenny is a raving success story. Still love talking about your story with coaches all over the nation using these, and at 2 different places, right? You took it to
well, I inherited it at Cersei, but yeah, it worked there too.
Yeah. So great program to get in if you're looking to make a little extra money for your program. And they're going to hold your hand through the whole thing. Reach out to Mark, reach out to Ryan, RJ, any of those guys. Social media wise, you can find me at Coach Chambo OK on Twitter. You can look me up on Facebook. If you're watching live, you've already found me there. And then you can email me at chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com. And don't forget about the Patreon, patreon.com/ChamberlainFootballConsulting, is where I'm helping coaches do whatever they need done. There's tiers there from, hey, I'm a youth coach, just need help building a playbook, to, we're a state championship contender and we need one extra coach digitally that's not exactly on the sidelines, but we'd like to have a whole bunch of help throughout the week. There's a tier there for any of those. So please reach over patreon.com/ChamberlainFootballConsulting. Where are you at, Mr. Simpson?
All things FB Coach Simpson. So fbcoachsimpson@gmail.com, fbcoachsimpson.com, or find me at Twitter at fbcoachsimpson.
Perfect. Podcast is at Coaching 101 Pod on Twitter. We want to thank you for being a listener to the Coaching 101 podcast. We'll hope you join us next week as we continue to make the complex more simple. Please consider subscribing to the show so you'll always know when the new episodes are out. We're asking for reviews now. So if you're listening on Spotify or listening on Apple Podcasts, those two especially, leave us a 5-star review. That's what we're looking for. If it's worse than that, shoot me a DM. Tell me, hey, man, y'all suck it up. I got one the other day. He said, hey, 11 minutes straight of advertisements to start the episode was not what I was looking for. We got it. So we made some adjustments on the intro, right? We don't want to be selling you on stuff the whole time. We're really trying to share knowledge here, but we both do have stuff for sale. So it's going to be a little bit of it. We'll leave you with this. It's hard to beat someone who never gives up. No matter the situation, find a way.